Imagine this. One day, you simply vanish. No explanation. No dramatic goodbye. No desperate pleas for attention. Just silence. The people who once took you for granted now find themselves staring at their phone, waiting for a message that will never come. Their mind starts racing, their heart pounds with unease, and suddenly they realize the weight of your absence. In a world where people assume they can always come back to you, where your presence is a given, disappearing is the ultimate act of control. It is not about revenge. It is not about playing games. It is about reclaiming your worth and proving a powerful truth. Your value was never in how much you gave, but in how much they lost when you walked away. This is not just about relationships. It's about self-respect, about breaking free from cycles of being undervalued. It's about understanding the Stoic principle of detachment, that true strength comes from knowing when to let go. Today, we're diving deep into the 10 intense emotions they feel when you simply disappear. Emotions they never expected, but ones they won't be able to escape. Are you ready? Let's begin. 1. The shock of absence. It starts like a quiet disruption, an empty chair where you once sat, an unread message that will never be answered, a presence that once felt inevitable, now reduced to silence. At first, they don't quite register it. Maybe you're just busy. Maybe you'll reach out tomorrow. But as the minutes stretch into hours and the hours into days, a creeping sense of unease takes over. Something is wrong. When you were always available, always the one to reach out, to care, to show up, they took you for granted. They assumed, without ever truly thinking about it, that you would always be there. And now, suddenly, you're not. This is where the panic begins. Not just because they miss you, but because your absence forces them to confront a reality they never expected. They have lost control. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them. Epictetus, Enchiridion. The simple fact that you're gone isn't what truly unsettles them. It's what your absence means. It forces them to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about you, about themselves, and about the relationship they had with you. They begin to wonder, was I too distant? Did I do something wrong? Have they moved on? The mind scrambles to make sense of the situation, and in doing so, magnifies the loss. The greatest irony is that while you were there, they barely noticed the value you brought. Now that you're gone, it's all they can think about. They start to retrace their steps, replaying old conversations, analyzing moments they once dismissed. Every unread message becomes a glaring sign of your detachment. Every memory feels heavier, burdened with the weight of things left unsaid. The comfort they once felt, the certainty that you would always be there, is gone, and with it comes an overwhelming sense of helplessness. This is the first stage of realization, and it is the most jarring. Because when someone disappears completely, without warning, without explanation, it does something far worse than simply leaving a void. It shakes their very perception of reality. It makes them question their own worth, their own choices, their own ability to hold on to something meaningful. The world they built with the assumption that you were a constant has suddenly collapsed, and now they must navigate the ruins. But here's the most important part. Do not break the silence. Do not offer them an explanation, a closure, or a response to their unspoken questions. Because the moment you do, you relieve them of the burden of their own reflection. Let them feel the weight of your absence. Let them wrestle with the discomfort of uncertainty. That discomfort is the only thing that will make them understand what they had and what they have now lost. They start looking for reassurance, expecting you to break first. Maybe you'll reach out. Maybe you'll post something, anything, to give them a glimpse into your life. But there's nothing, just absence. And that's when the panic sets in. What if they miscalculated? What if this time you're truly done? What if you've moved on, healed, found peace? Without them, that thought alone is unbearable. It wasn't supposed to be this way. They were supposed to have time. They were supposed to be the one in control. The shock of your absence is not just about losing you. It's about losing the version of themselves that existed in your presence. The comfort of knowing they could always reach out. The ego boost of having someone who cared, who made the effort, who showed up. All of that is gone, leaving behind a void they never thought they'd feel. But here's the lesson. When you remove yourself, you force people to face the truth about how much you mattered. And the more they resist that truth, the harder it hits. So, let them feel the shock. Let them sit in the silence. Because for the first time, they are realizing something profound. You were never just an option. You were a presence, a force. And now, in your absence, they finally understand what they lost. 2. The void of your presence. The shock of your absence leaves them stunned, unable to process what just happened. But soon, that initial jolt of disbelief morphs into something deeper, an unbearable void. It's not just about you being gone, it's about the irreplaceable presence you once held in their life. At first, they convince themselves it doesn't matter. They tell themselves they'll be fine, that life will go on as usual. But then something strange happens. Everything begins to feel different. The places you once went together seem emptier. The conversations they used to enjoy now feel hollow. The absence they thought they could ignore becomes an undeniable weight pressing down on them. It's not just that you're gone, it's that you took something with you. The energy, the warmth, the sense of connection that made their world feel just a little more alive. Now, without you, there's a void. And it's a void that no distraction, no temporary pleasure, no casual encounter can fill. They might go out with friends, bury themselves in work, or scroll endlessly through social media, but in the quiet moments, the spaces where they once felt your presence, the emptiness lingers. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." They always assumed there would be another chance, another conversation, another day where they could reconnect with you. But now, as reality sets in, they are forced to confront the fact that tomorrow is no longer guaranteed. They begin to realize just how much they took you for granted. The irony is, they never expected to feel this way. Maybe they thought you were replaceable. Maybe they assumed they could move on effortlessly. But the void you left isn't just about missing a person. It's about missing a feeling, a presence that made their life richer in ways they never acknowledged. Now, they replay old messages, reread conversations, trying to find traces of what they lost. They search for you in places you used to be, only to be reminded that you are no longer within reach. The mind rebels against loss. It seeks to reclaim what is missing, to restore what feels incomplete. And so they start reaching, perhaps subtly at first, checking your online status, asking mutual friends about you, looking for signs that you might still be thinking about them too. But when they find nothing, no texts, no posts, no way to bridge the distance, the void deepens. This stage is where regret begins to take root. They wonder why they didn't appreciate you more, why they didn't hold on tighter, why they assumed you would always be there. The foolish believe that what is constant in their life will remain constant forever. The wise understand that everything is temporary and that once something is lost, it may never return. But here's where the lesson of Stoicism applies. You cannot fill that void for them. You cannot soothe their discomfort or ease their regret. The only way for them to understand your value is to feel the full weight of your absence. Let them sit with it. Let them wrestle with their own emotions, because only when they fully experience what life is like without you will they begin to comprehend what they had in the first place. 3. The torment of uncertainty. As the void you left behind grows heavier, their mind becomes restless. It refuses to accept the uncertainty of your silence, and so begins the torment of unanswered questions. Where are you? What are you doing? Are you happier without them? The unknown is a powerful tormentor, and now it takes full control over them. At first, they assume it's temporary. They tell themselves you'll reach out soon, that this silence is just a phase. But as time stretches on with no sign of you, something unsettling begins to happen. Their confidence starts to erode. They begin to wonder, why haven't they come back? Why is there no explanation, no message, no sign of life? That's when the torment of uncertainty takes hold. The human mind despises the unknown. It craves certainty, even when that certainty is painful. When someone disappears without warning, it disrupts the narrative they've created in their head. They expected you to always be there, to always respond, to always care. But now, faced with silence, their mind spirals into endless questions. Did I do something wrong? Are they with someone else? Have they already forgotten me? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." But they don't have this power, at least not yet. Instead of controlling their thoughts, they become consumed by them. The lack of answers gnaws at them, leaving them restless and uneasy. They check their phone more often, hoping for a notification that never comes. They scroll through social media, looking for any sign that you might still be thinking of them. But there is nothing, just an empty void where certainty once existed. This is the moment when they start seeking reassurance. They may ask mutual friends about you, subtly trying to gather information without admitting how much it's bothering them. They may even try to manipulate the situation, liking an old post of yours, sending a casual message just to see if you'll respond. But when nothing works, when they're met with more silence, the uncertainty deepens. The mind, in its desperation to fill in the gaps, starts to create its own conclusions. And these imagined realities are often far worse than the truth. They picture you moving on effortlessly, laughing with new people, thriving in a life where they no longer exist. They replay old conversations, searching for hidden signs that you were planning to leave all along. They torment themselves with every possibility, and yet they are powerless to change the reality that you are gone. And this is where the real suffering begins, not because of your absence, but because they no longer have control over the story. They were once the one who decided when to engage and when to withdraw, but now you have taken that power away. They are left in a state of limbo, unable to move forward, yet unable to go back. Stoicism teaches us that true peace comes from accepting the things we cannot control, but for them, this is an unbearable lesson. They resist the truth. They refuse to accept that they no longer have access to you, and the more they fight against reality, the more they suffer. This is why uncertainty is one of the most powerful forms of psychological distress. It forces people to confront their deepest fears, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of not mattering, the fear of being replaced. And yet, there is nothing they can do to escape it. No amount of searching, analyzing, or strategizing will bring back the certainty they once had. The torment of uncertainty is their burden to bear, not yours. Let them wrestle with it. Let them feel every moment of doubt and insecurity, because in that suffering, they will finally begin to understand the value of what they lost. 4. The weight of self-reflection. Desperation breeds introspection. As their frantic search for answers leads nowhere, they are left with only one place to look: within. The weight of self-reflection settles in, forcing them to confront the painful truth they have long avoided. This loss wasn't accidental. It was a consequence of their own actions. At first, they resist it. The mind, when faced with discomfort, seeks distractions. They try to drown out the silence with noise, social media, fleeting conversations, mindless entertainment. But the silence persists, and within that silence, something begins to shift. The weight of self-reflection creeps in, slow and relentless, like a tide they can no longer hold back. When you were around, they had an escape. Your presence allowed them to avoid their own flaws, their own shortcomings. You were the emotional cushion that absorbed the weight of their mistakes, the one who reassured them when they faltered. But now, you're gone, and there is no one left to soften the truth. For the first time, they must face themselves without a filter, without external validation, without an easy way out. Epictetus once said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, or else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" But they are not ready for that level of honesty, not yet. Instead, they try to rewrite history, convincing themselves that they were never the problem. They shift blame, telling themselves you were too sensitive, too demanding, too unreasonable. But the silence fights back. The absence of your presence forces them to re-examine every moment with painful clarity. They start replaying conversations, remembering the times you tried to express your needs, the times you voiced your hurt, the times they dismissed your feelings as overreactions. They recall the moments when you gave them second chances, when you forgave them too easily, when you stayed even when they didn't deserve it. And with every memory, the weight of realization becomes heavier. Self-reflection is a double-edged sword. It is both painful and enlightening. The more they analyze their past behavior, the more they see the patterns they were blind to before. Maybe they notice how they took you for granted, how they prioritized convenience over connection, how they assumed you would always be there no matter what. And that realization is not just uncomfortable, it is suffocating. This is the stage where regret begins to take root. They wish they had paid more attention, that they had listened instead of dismissed, that they had given more instead of only taking. But regret is powerless without action, and for the first time they feel truly powerless. They cannot undo what has been done. They cannot erase the silence, the finality of your absence. The only thing they have left is the painful truth staring back at them. They were the reason you left. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom comes from experience, from failure, from being forced to confront one's own mistakes." And now, in your absence, they are left with a choice. Ignore the lesson and repeat the cycle, or finally learn from it. But that choice is theirs alone. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to make them understand. The weight of self-reflection is a burden they must carry, a path they must walk on their own, and whether they learn from it or not is no longer your concern. Because while they are stuck in the past, replaying old mistakes, you are already moving forward. You have freed yourself from their cycle. Now, they must decide if they will do the same. 5. The desperate need to reconnect. Realizing their mistakes is one thing, accepting them is another, and for most, the easiest escape from guilt is action. So instead of sitting with their regret, they do the only thing that feels right at this moment. They try to reach out. The need to reconnect becomes desperate, urgent, and consuming. At first, They convinced themselves that your absence was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience, an unexpected change in routine, but nothing they couldn't handle. They believed that eventually you'd come back, just like before. After all, hadn't you always been the one to reach out, to smooth things over, to rebuild the bridge they so carelessly burned? But this time is different. This time the silence doesn't break, and the realization is terrifying. Now they find themselves drowning in the consequences of their own actions. The weight of self-reflection has already crushed their illusions, and the burden of regret is becoming unbearable. They want relief, an escape from the anxiety that gnaws at their every waking moment, and so they do the only thing they think will save them. They try to pull you back in. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." But they have not yet mastered this lesson. Instead of turning inward to find peace, they turn outward, desperate for external validation, specifically yours. The person they once ignored, dismissed, or mistreated has now become their only source of relief. And so they reach out. It starts subtly, a like on an old photo, a view on your stories, a random out-of-the-blue message that feels casual but is anything but, "Hey, just saw something that reminded me of you. Hope you're doing well. I just wanted to check in." But when there is no response, their desperation intensifies. They start crafting longer messages, rehearsing their words, trying to find the perfect way to make you break the silence. Maybe they send an apology, vague yet filled with nostalgia, hoping to tug at your emotions. Maybe they send a late-night text, fueled by loneliness and regret, grasping for the connection they once took for granted. And when that doesn't work, they resort to more desperate measures. They reach out to mutual friends, asking about you, trying to get a sense of where you stand. They scroll through your social media, searching for any sign that you might still care. If you've blocked them, the frustration is unbearable. The lack of access, the inability to see what you're doing, drives them mad. They might even show up in places where they think they'll accidentally run into you just to feel close to you again. But here's the truth. They don't miss you. They miss the comfort of you. They miss the security, the emotional safety net, the validation they received from knowing that someone out there cared about them no matter what. They miss the feeling of being wanted, even if they never truly valued you the way they should have. This is the moment where they feel like they are losing control of their emotions, of the situation, of you. The power dynamic has shifted entirely, and they are no longer the ones who dictate the rules. Now, they are chasing you, not because they have changed, but because they can't stand the thought of you moving on. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And that is precisely what is happening here. Their desperation is not just about the present. It is about the imagined future in which you are gone forever, in which someone else has taken your place, in which they have lost their hold over you for good. But you are no longer playing their game. The person they used to rely on for endless chances, for constant reassurance, for unconditional presence, that person no longer exists. You have reclaimed your peace, your power, your emotional independence. They will try everything to make you respond. They will test every possible avenue to get your attention, but the only way they will ever truly learn is if you do the one thing they never expected, nothing at all. 6. The battle between regret and pride. But reconnecting is not as simple as sending a message. Their mind is a battlefield, torn between two forces: regret for taking you for granted and pride that refuses to admit fault. They hesitate, rewrite their words, delete their texts. Should they reach out? Should they wait? The battle between regret and pride rages on. At first, they thought reaching out would be enough. A simple message, a nostalgic reminder, a carefully crafted excuse to break the silence. But when you didn't respond, when you didn't give them even the smallest acknowledgement, they were left with something far worse than rejection, uncertainty. And so begins the internal war, a battle between two forces that have shaped them for as long as they can remember: regret and pride. Regret whispers in their ear, reminding them of all the moments they could have chosen differently. It forces them to replay the past, to analyze every interaction, to wonder how they could have been so blind. They recall the times they ignored your calls, brushed off your concerns, took your kindness as a given. They see now with painful clarity how their actions led to this moment. And the worst part? They can't change it. Pride, however, refuses to surrender so easily. It tells them that you should be the one to reach out, that disappearing was a childish move, that they don't need you anyway. It convinces them that if they just act indifferent, if they post the right photos, if they pretend they've moved on, if they make it look like they're thriving without you, then maybe, just maybe, they can regain control. They tell themselves they don't care. They tell their friends they're better off. They try to rewrite the narrative, turning you into the one who overreacted, the one who gave up too easily. But deep down, they know the truth. No matter how much they try to bury it beneath distractions, the regret lingers, festering like an open wound. And it's exhausting. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But they don't yet understand this truth. They are still enslaved to their emotions, still held hostage by their conflicting desires. One moment, they want to apologize, to admit their mistakes, to do whatever it takes to bring you back. The next, they are convincing themselves that you never really mattered to begin with. The cycle continues, an endless tug-of-war between guilt and ego, vulnerability and stubbornness. This is why they oscillate between extremes. One day they post a cryptic quote about moving on, as if to prove to the world and to themselves that they are unfazed. The next, they find themselves staring at their phone, debating whether to type out a message they swore they'd never send. They might even attempt a casual encounter, orchestrating ways to accidentally run into you, just to see if they still have some hold over you. But here's the painful reality they don't want to accept. You are no longer part of this battle. The only person they are fighting is themselves. You have already won, not by proving anything to them, but by choosing yourself. And so the war rages on inside them. Some will eventually surrender to regret, mustering the courage to apologize, to acknowledge their faults, to admit that losing you was their own doing. Others will let pride consume them, holding on to their illusions until they harden into resentment. Either way, the outcome is the same. You are gone, and they are left to wrestle with a war they never saw coming. Seneca once said, "He who does not prevent a crime when he can, encourages it." The same applies here, not just to actions, but to choices. They had every opportunity to change, to treat you differently, to recognize your value before it was too late. But they didn't. And now they are left with the one thing they never expected to feel, the crushing weight of knowing they had something special and let it slip away. But you have freed yourself. The battle they are fighting is theirs alone. 7. The illusion of moving on. Unable to face their regret directly, they take another path. They convince themselves that moving on is the solution. They go out, meet new people, drown themselves in distractions. They tell themselves they are over it. But deep down, they know. It's all an illusion. Nothing truly replaces what was lost. To avoid facing the truth, they do what so many others have done before them. They try to move on. They surround themselves with distractions, hoping to prove to you, to themselves, to the world, that they are unaffected. But deep down they know it's all a carefully constructed illusion. They tell themselves they're over it. They convince their friends they don't care, that losing you was insignificant, that they've already moved on. On the surface, they make it look effortless. New routines, new distractions, even new people. But here's the truth. It's all a carefully crafted illusion, one designed to hide the growing void they refuse to acknowledge. At first, it feels like freedom. They revel in the novelty of their so-called independence, filling their time with anything that numbs the discomfort, going out more, scrolling endlessly through social media, jumping into new relationships without real emotional investment. They mistake avoidance for healing, distraction for progress. But beneath it all, something isn't right. It often starts subtly. They see a place you used to go together and feel a pang of something unspoken. A song plays that reminds them of a moment shared, and for the briefest second, they forget they were supposed to be over it. Maybe they laugh at a joke, only to realize that instinctively they wanted to share it with you. It's in these fleeting moments that the cracks begin to show, the cracks in the illusion they worked so hard to build. This is where the most dangerous phase begins, the performative moving on. They start to act as if they are thriving, even if they aren't. They post pictures meant to look carefree, captions filled with forced positivity. They speak louder, laugh harder, surround themselves with people who don't even truly matter to them. They do all of this for one reason, to convince themselves, and perhaps even you, that they're fine. But the mind knows the truth. The more they deny what they feel, the more the emptiness grows. Distractions lose their effect. Temporary pleasures fail to satisfy. They may even chase after new relationships, hoping to replicate what they lost, but it never quite feels the same. Because deep down, they are not truly moving forward. They are running, hoping that if they go fast enough, they can outrun the weight of your absence. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And therein lies their mistake. Instead of confronting their emotions, they've filled their mind with delusions of strength, with narratives designed to protect their ego. But real strength is found in acceptance, in acknowledging loss without fear, in embracing discomfort rather than masking it. Eventually, the illusion begins to crumble. When the distractions fade, when the nights grow quiet, when the people around them no longer serve as an escape, what remains? The truth. And it's in that moment, in that undeniable realization, that they are finally forced to face what they have avoided all along. They never actually moved on. But by then it won't matter. You are already gone. You have already healed. You understood something they refused to accept. That true growth doesn't come from pretending, but from confronting. And that is why, in the end, the person who really moved on was you. 8. The agony of silence. No matter how many distractions they find, there is one thing they cannot escape: the silence. It lingers, suffocating them, reminding them of everything they no longer have. The agony of silence is far worse than any confrontation, because it leaves them alone with their thoughts, and their thoughts are merciless. They post, they laugh, they pretend, but every moment of forced indifference only serves to highlight one unbearable truth. Your silence is louder than any words they could say, and in that silence, reality begins to sink in. Silence has a way of amplifying everything. In a world where constant noise, texts, calls, notifications has become the norm, your absence is no longer just an absence. It is a deafening void. At first, they might have expected a temporary break, a pause before you inevitably reached out again. But as the hours turn to days and the days stretch into weeks, they are met with nothing but an unbearable, suffocating silence. It starts subtly, the itch to check their phone, the reflexive glance at their notifications. Then, as time drags on, that silence becomes a presence in itself. It lingers in every quiet moment, in the spaces where your laughter used to fill the air, in the empty inbox where your messages used to be. The weight of it settles into their mind, an unsettling reminder of the fact that for the first time you are truly gone. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Withdraw into yourself." Our own inner self is the best part of us. Meditations 4.3. This is a truth they never understood until now. They spent so much time relying on your presence, your attention, your energy, that they never learned how to be alone with themselves. Your silence forces them into an unfamiliar space, one where there is no distraction, no validation, no external reassurance, just them and their own thoughts. And in that solitude, discomfort grows. Without you responding, without you filling the void, they are left face to face with a version of themselves they do not know how to navigate. They begin to ask, what if this is it? What if they never speak to me again? What if they have truly moved on? They start reaching for any sign of you, a late-night scroll through old conversations, the rereading of messages they once ignored, the sound of a notification, only to realize it isn't from you. Each passing day deepens their desperation, but they cannot force a response out of you. Then the fear sets in. What if this is the new reality? What if your silence is not a temporary lesson, but a permanent consequence? The longer it stretches on, the harder it becomes to break. They hesitate to reach out, fearing that your response, or worse, your lack of one, will confirm their greatest fear, that they have lost you for good. This is where Stoicism's greatest lesson takes shape, not for them, but for you. Because your silence is not about playing games or seeking revenge. It is about mastery. It is about reclaiming your space, about withdrawing into yourself, as Marcus Aurelius said, and understanding that the best part of you is not found in how others perceive you, but in how you perceive yourself. You do not need to break the silence. You do not need to answer their unspoken questions. Let them sit in their own emptiness. Let them struggle with their own thoughts. Because true power does not come from speaking. It comes from knowing when to remain silent. 9. The crushing fear of permanent loss. As the silence stretches on, their illusion of control crumbles. What if this isn't temporary? What if you're never coming back? The fear of permanent loss takes hold, crushing them under the weight of finality. They are no longer just missing you. They are terrified they have lost you forever. At first, they assumed it was temporary. Maybe you just needed space. Maybe you were playing a game, testing their patience, waiting for them to make the first move. But as time stretches on, and their every attempt to reach you is met with silence, a terrifying realization dawns on them. What if this is forever? What if you're truly gone? That thought alone is enough to send them into a spiral. The uncertainty that once tormented them has now morphed into something much worse, the crushing fear that they have lost you for good. This is no longer just an emotional phase. It is an existential dread, a sinking feeling that sits in their chest and refuses to leave. They begin to panic. What if someone else has taken their place? What if you've moved on, not just physically, but emotionally, so far beyond them that there's no hope of reconciliation? They start picturing you laughing with someone new, sharing the inside jokes that once belonged to them, creating new memories where they no longer exist. The idea of being replaced, of becoming a mere footnote in your story, is unbearable. Seneca once wrote, "While we are postponing, life speeds by." And now they realize how much time they wasted. They postponed appreciating you, postponed giving you the attention you deserved, postponed making things right, always assuming they had more time. But time has run out, and they are powerless to change the past. They try to convince themselves that it's not too late, that they can still fix this. Maybe if they send one last message, make one final call, show up at your door unannounced, maybe, just maybe, you'll let them back in. They craft long, desperate texts, but hesitate before hitting send. What if you don't respond? What if their worst fear is true, that you've closed the door on them permanently? This is the moment they realize just how much they have lost. Not just your presence, but your patience, your kindness, your understanding. They no longer have the comfort of knowing you will always be there, no longer have the security of assuming they can reach out whenever they please. The illusion of control has been shattered. This fear is unlike anything they have experienced before, because it is not just about losing you. It is about losing the version of themselves that existed with you. They begin to wonder, who am I without them? The person they were when they had you in their life was stronger, more confident, more at peace. Now they feel hollow, like a faded version of themselves. But here's the irony. This fear, this crushing weight of loss, is something they could have avoided if only they had valued you when they had the chance. And now, as they sit in the wreckage of what they once took for granted, they are left with only one unbearable truth. They let go of something irreplaceable, and there is nothing they can do to undo it. 10. The awakening of emotional independence. There was a time when their absence would have consumed you, when every moment was spent wondering if they still thought about you, if they regretted losing you, if they would ever reach out. You clung to the hope of reconciliation, believing that closure could only come from them. But something has changed. While they are drowning in regret, tangled in the agony of their own silence, you have found something far greater: freedom. At first, you didn't recognize it. The urge to check your phone, to search for their name in a sea of notifications, still lingered. But as the days passed, something profound happened. The weight of their approval, their words, their presence, it all started to fade. The chains that once bound you to their perception of your worth loosened, and in their place, an unshakable strength emerged. As Epictetus once wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Discourses, Book 4. You finally understand this truth, not just as a concept, but as a lived experience. You no longer wait for an apology that may never come. You no longer need their validation to feel whole. You no longer define yourself through their gaze. Meanwhile, they remain trapped in the past, desperate to undo their mistakes, to regain the power they once held over you. But the truth is, they never had power to begin with. You were the one who granted them access to your emotions, the one who allowed their presence to dictate your sense of self. And now, you have taken that power back. This is the greatest realization of all. You did not just disappear from their life. You transcended it. You stepped into a version of yourself that is complete without them. You have stopped searching for closure in their words because you have found it within yourself. Your life no longer orbits around proving your worth to someone who was blind to it in the first place. You are no longer waiting for a message, a call, or an explanation. You have outgrown all of it. And that is the most unexpected outcome for them. They thought you vanished to make a statement, to provoke a reaction. But now, as they desperately search for ways to reclaim what they lost, they are faced with a truth they never saw coming. You didn't just disappear, you evolved. That is the ultimate awakening. That is emotional independence. Silence speaks louder than words. Disappearing is not about revenge, it's about reclaiming your power. When you walk away, you force people to face the void they never thought would exist. But more importantly, you free yourself from the weight of seeking validation from those who never truly valued you. The real lesson here isn't about making them miss you. It's about realizing that you never needed them in the first place. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever walked away from someone who took you for granted? What happened when you finally let go? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you never miss another lesson in resilience and self-mastery. And remember the words of Marcus Aurelius: "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." The question is, are you finally ready to live for yourself?